Almost 500 feet below the water surface in an underwater anomaly, the team from Bermuda Triangle into Cursed Waters has discovered what appears to be man-made monolithic rock.
What if everything we think we know about ancient civilizations is wrong? A Japanese diver found stone structures 80 feet underwater. Paris workers unearthed a medieval district 5 floors down, and London crews uncovered a Roman amphitheater beneath the financial district.
This is part of an important public building located in a large Roman forum, dating to around 80 AD.
This is Kentish Ragstone. This was a building that was 40 metres long, 20 metres wide. It was probably 2.5 stories high.
These discoveries are evidence that our ancestors built masterpieces so advanced, so incredible, that time itself had to bury them to keep their secrets safe. Templo Mayor. In Mexico City's downtown, workers from the city's electricity company were doing routine construction work on February 21st, 1978. They were digging in an area locals called the Island of the Dogs, named as such because it was the place where stray animals would gather during floods. Just over 2 meters down, their shovels struck something that would completely change what we know about history. A massive stone disc emerged from the earth, over 3¼ meters across and weighing 8.5 metric tons. The relief carved into this ancient stone showed a dismembered female figure that archaeologists would later identify as Coyolxauhqui, sister to the Aztec war god Huitzilopochtli. This accidental discovery would lead to one of the most significant archaeological finds in Mexican history. What the workers didn't know was that they were standing directly above the Templo Mayor, the great temple that once dominated the heart of the Aztec capital, Tenochtitlan. For centuries, the exact location of this sacred pyramid had been lost. It was buried beneath layers of Spanish colonial buildings and modern city streets. Previous archaeologists had searched for it, but their efforts had been scattered and limited. The stone disc changed everything overnight. Eduardo Matos Moctezuma, the archaeologist who would lead the excavation, recognized the significance immediately. This carved stone was positioned exactly where Aztec mythology said it should be, at the base of Huitzilopochtli's temple, representing the dismembered goddess thrown down the sacred mountain. The discovery sparked a presidential decree authorizing the Templo Mayor project. From 1978 to 1982, teams worked to uncover what had been hidden for over 400 years. To reach the temple, 13 buildings had to be demolished. As the excavation progressed, archaeologists realized they were finding 7 different construction phases built on top of each other. The Aztecs had followed the tradition of building new temples over older ones, using the bulk of the previous structure as a foundation. Each expansion marked the reign of a different emperor. The treasures buried within were absolutely incredible. More than 7,000 objects emerged from the excavation, most of which were offerings placed during sacred rituals. The temple itself had stood 60 meters tall, a 4-tiered pyramid topped by twin shrines. The northern shrine was dedicated to Tlaloc and painted blue to represent water. The southern shrine belonged to Huitzilopochtli and was painted red to symbolize blood and warfare. This wasn't just a building, it was the spiritual and political center of an entire empire. When the Spanish conquistadors destroyed Tenochtitlan in 1521, they systematically demolished the Templo Mayor. The stones were used as construction material for the new colonial city, and over time, the exact location was forgotten. For centuries, people walked over the buried temple without knowing it lay beneath their feet. The city had literally been built on top of its own history, and while it is one of the most interesting discoveries, this next one will also surprise you. Hidden Tombs of Katna. The discovery in Mexico City is just the beginning. In Syria, beneath the ancient palace of Katna, they found a hidden tomb that had been sealed for over 3,000 years, untouched by looters and forgotten by time. The journey to this tomb wasn't simple. Deep inside the palace, a mysterious corridor stretched 40 meters through the heart of the structure. It sloped downward, cutting through layers of mud brick until it reached a vertical shaft 5 meters deep. No stairs led down, only darkness. Workers had to use ladders to descend into what felt like another world entirely. At the bottom, 2 basalt statues stood guard. They had been watching over this entrance for millennia, their limestone eyes still intact, their hair carved in the traditional Syrian style of the 18th century BC. Between them lay the entrance to something extraordinary. It was an entire underground complex designed for something far more complex than simple burials. Inside, they found not just one chamber, but multiple rooms that served different purposes. The main chamber held the remains of at least 19 people, but this wasn't just a burial ground. Stone benches lined the walls, and beneath them lay animal bones. evidence of feasts that had taken place in this underground world. The living would come down here to dine with their deceased kings, sharing meals in the darkness with the dead. Storage jars and bowls scattered throughout the chamber told a story of ritual feasting that spanned generations. These were the memorial feasts, known as kispum from ancient texts. They were elaborate affairs where families would honor their dead by eating alongside them. The most remarkable discovery came from the Western Chamber. Here lay a complete skeleton, the only one found in anatomical order. But what shocked researchers was evidence that the body had been heated to around 200 degrees. Why would ancient people do this? Perhaps for preservation, maybe to prevent decay during long journeys home, or possibly as part of a ritual we still don't understand. The body wore a gold belt that had survived intact, with beads of gold, carnelian, amethyst, and glass still arranged exactly as they had been placed thousands of years ago. Multiple layers of dyed cloth covered the remains, colors still visible after 3 millennia underground. The preservation was incredible. This tomb was a complex system where the dead moved through different stages. Fresh burials started in one chamber, then moved to stone sarcophagi where they could still receive offerings, and finally ended in an ossuary where the oldest remains found their final rest. Generations of royalty were united in death, creating an underground kingdom that operated for centuries. When the palace was finally destroyed around 1340 BC, this tomb was simply abandoned and forgotten. The entrance was filled with debris, the corridors became silent, and the underground kingdom disappeared from human memory. Only recently have we begun to understand the sophisticated beliefs about death and family that created this hidden world. That said, this next discovery also showcases the complex burial rituals of the past. Pyramid of Djoser. Napoleon's army reached Saqqara in 1798 and found the step pyramid buried under sand. For centuries, locals had used it as a stone quarry without knowing what they were destroying. The world's first pyramid had been sitting there for over 4,000 years, just waiting for someone to realize what it actually was. English archaeologist Cecil Malaby Firth arrived in 1924 and made the first major discovery. Inside a limestone chamber called the Serdab, he found a life-size statue of King Djoser with 2 eye holes cut into the wall. The statue had been watching the desert for 47 centuries. French architect Jean-Philippe Lauer joined in 1926 and spent 50 years excavating the site. Beneath the pyramid, he found a labyrinth of tunnels stretching nearly 6 kilometers. The walls were lined with 36,000 blue ceramic tiles designed to look like reed matting. Over 40,000 stone vessels filled the underground chambers, many inscribed with the names of kings who ruled before Djoser. The pyramid itself went through 6 construction phases. It started as a traditional mastaba tomb, 63 meters square and 8 meters high. Imhotep, Djoser's architect, kept building upward, creating 6 steps that reached 62 meters tall. The final structure used 330,000 cubic meters of limestone. Underground, granite blocks weighing 3.5 tons sealed the burial chamber. Robbers had emptied it centuries ago, leaving only fragments of Djoser's mummified foot. The complex covered 15 hectares, surrounded by a wall with 14 false doors and 1 real entrance. The discoveries at Saqqara revealed just how sophisticated ancient civilizations could be, but sometimes preservation comes from the most violent forces of nature. Villa of the Mysteries. In the spring of 1909, Aurelio Idem was exploring the outskirts of Pompeii when his shovel struck something unexpected beneath the volcanic ash. They were buildings, but they had been waiting under 30 feet of debris for over 18 centuries. Idem, who owned the Hotel Suisse in Pompeii, had been conducting private excavations when he hit upon the edge of what appeared to be a massive Roman villa. As his team carefully removed wheelbarrow after wheelbarrow of volcanic material, they revealed something extraordinary. The villa had been preserved in a state that defied belief. Columns stood intact, mosaics remained unbroken, and most remarkably, the walls were covered in vibrant frescoes that looked as if they had been painted yesterday. The villa had been buried during the catastrophic eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. For over 1,800 years, it lay hidden beneath layers of ash and pumice, completely forgotten by the world above. The volcanic material that had destroyed the city had also become its protector, sealing the villa in a time capsule that preserved every detail of Roman life. Just 1 week into the excavation, Item's team made their most sensational discovery. In a 15 by 15 foot room, they found a series of life-sized figures painted against a vivid red background. More than 24 characters seemed to come alive on the walls, depicting what scholars would later interpret as mysterious religious rituals. The figures appeared to be engaged in some form of initiation ceremony, possibly connected to the cult of Dionysus, the god of wine. The preservation was so perfect that you could see individual brushstrokes and facial expressions. The colors remained brilliant after nearly 2 millennia underground. Red backgrounds blazed with intensity, while the skin tones of the figures appeared almost lifelike. It was as if the ancient artists had just finished their work. But the discovery came with immediate dangers. The moment the villa was exposed to air and sunlight, the frescoes began to deteriorate. An earthquake struck just over a month after excavations began, threatening the fragile paintings. Excavation work had to be halted within 3 weeks to focus on protection rather than discovery. The villa, initially called Villa Item after its discoverer, covered about 40,000 square feet and contained at least 60 rooms. It had served as both a luxury residence and working farm, complete with wine pressing areas, kitchens, baths, and gardens. But it was those mysterious painted figures that captured the world's attention and eventually gave the villa its permanent name. The Villa of the Mysteries showed how volcanic destruction could become perfect preservation, but sometimes the most remarkable discoveries happen not in remote archaeological sites, but in the middle of bustling modern cities. London's Roman amphitheater. The year is 1988. Workers at the Guildhall in London's financial district were preparing to break ground for a new art gallery. They expected to find nothing more than old Victorian foundations and maybe some medieval stonework. What they found instead would rewrite London's ancient history forever. As excavation began, the first hints appeared. Stone blocks too perfectly cut to be random rubble. Curved walls that followed no known architectural pattern from the site's documented past. Then came the moment that stopped everyone cold. The workers had uncovered the entrance to a Roman amphitheater, buried for over 1,500 years beneath the heart of modern London. The Romans had arrived in Britain in 43 AD, transforming a modest riverside settlement into Londinium, a thriving imperial city. By 70 AD, they had constructed their amphitheater from timber, creating a venue that could hold 6,000 spectators. The structure served as the social heart of the colony, hosting gladiatorial contests, public executions, and religious ceremonies that bound the community together through shared spectacle. But this wasn't just any amphitheater. Archaeological evidence revealed that the Romans had rebuilt it in stone during the early 2nd century, upgrading the wooden structure with ragstone walls and tiled entrances. The arena floor, measuring 60 by 50 meters, had witnessed decades of blood and entertainment before the empire's collapse left it abandoned. Here's where the story takes a remarkable turn. When the Saxons arrived centuries later, they found these mysterious Roman ruins still standing. Not understanding their original purpose, they repurposed the amphitheater as their guild hall, their center of governance and trade. This decision would echo through the ages. Medieval builders constructed their own guild hall directly above the Roman foundations, unknowingly preserving the ancient structure beneath. A 13th century gatehouse was built precisely over the amphitheater's southern entrance, as if the land itself remembered its original design. Even the nearby church of St. Lawrence Jewry follows an irregular alignment that mirrors the amphitheater's elliptical shape. The excavation revealed something else. These buildings weren't built at all in the traditional sense. They were structures that had been systematically buried by time, debris, and deliberate construction over centuries. Layer upon layer of London's history had accumulated above them, creating a vertical timeline stretching from Roman Britain to the modern era. Today, visitors can walk through the excavated remains in the Guildhall Art Gallery's basement. Dark stones mark the amphitheater's perimeter and the plaza above, a subtle reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary discoveries lie not in distant lands, but directly beneath our feet, waiting for the right moment to surface and reveal the hidden depths of our own past. Sometimes, however, these discoveries can be underwater too. Yonaguni Monument. In 1987, a local diver was exploring the crystal-clear waters off Japan's Ryukyu Islands when he spotted something that shouldn't exist. 25 meters below the surface lay what looked like an ancient city carved from stone. Massive rectangular blocks, perfectly straight edges, and what appeared to be ceremonial steps leading down into the depths. The Yonaguni Monument stretches 50 meters long and 20 meters wide, with towering walls that rise from the ocean floor like something out of a lost world. The structure displays features that seem almost impossible to explain naturally. Narrow corridors, arched doorways, and walls meeting at precise 90-degree angles. Marine geologist Masaki Kimura has spent decades studying this underwater mystery. His findings suggest the monument shows clear signs of human modification. Tool marks along the surfaces, drainage holes carved at specific intervals, and structural elements that mirror ancient Japanese castle architecture. But here's what makes this discovery truly mind-bending. If Yonaguni is indeed man-made, it would have been constructed over 10,000 years ago, when sea levels were much lower. That places its creation at the end of the last ice age, predating every known advanced civilization by thousands of years. The implications are staggering. We're talking about sophisticated stone-cutting techniques, urban planning, and architectural knowledge that supposedly didn't exist until much later in human history. Yet here, it sits on the ocean floor, silently challenging everything we think we know about our ancestors' capabilities. Some researchers dismiss Yonaguni as a natural rock formation shaped by earthquakes and erosion over millions of years. They point to similar geological structures like Ireland's Giant's Causeway as proof that nature can create seemingly artificial patterns. However, the monument's defenders argue that natural processes cannot account for the precision of the cuts, the strategic placement of features, or the overall design that suggests deliberate planning and construction. While there's still confusion whether this monument is natural or man-made, this next one, despite being man-made, had scientists confused. Basilica Cistern. Beneath the streets of modern Istanbul lies a secret that remained hidden for nearly 4 centuries. In 1565, a French scholar named Petrus Gillius was wandering through Constantinople when locals told him about something strange. They claimed there was a vast underground chamber where they could lower buckets through holes in their basement floors and draw up fresh water. Some even said they caught fish down there. Gillius couldn't believe what he was hearing. An underground lake beneath one of the world's greatest cities, but when he convinced someone to row him down into the darkness, what he found defied all logic. Stretching out before him was a cathedral-sized chamber supported by 336 marble columns, each standing 9 meters tall. The columns disappeared into black water that reflected flickering lamplight like a mirror. This was the Basilica Cistern, built by Emperor Justinian in the 6th century to supply water to the Byzantine imperial palace. For over 1,000 years, it had stored 80,000 tons of water beneath the city. Then, after the Ottoman conquest in 1453, it was simply forgotten. But here's what makes this discovery truly mind-bending. The cistern had been hiding in plain sight all along. It sat directly beneath a public square where thousands of people walked every day, completely unaware of the massive structure below their feet. The Byzantines had built an engineering marvel using columns stolen from older Roman buildings across the empire, creating an underground forest of mismatched marble pillars. At the far northwest corner, Gillius found something that still puzzles experts today. 2 column bases were carved with the face of Medusa, the mythical creature whose gaze could turn people to stone. But these heads were positioned sideways and upside down, as if whoever placed them was afraid of their power even in stone. When the Ottomans finally restored the cistern centuries later, they found it wasn't completely empty. Urban legends claim they discovered a sarcophagus hidden in the depths, containing the preserved remains of a creature that was half human, half serpent. Photographs were supposedly taken, but no newspapers from that time survived to prove the story. 7,000 slaves had built this underground palace of water, and then history simply erased it from memory. If something this massive could vanish from human knowledge for 400 years, right beneath one of the world's most important cities, what else lies forgotten under our feet? Third pyramid in El Castillo at Chichen Itza. Deep in the Yucatan Peninsula stands El Castillo, one of the most visited ancient structures on Earth. Over 1,400,000 people climb its steps each year, but none of them know the full truth about what they're standing on. What appears to be a single Mayan pyramid is actually something far more mysterious. These buildings weren't built from the ground up. They were constructed layer by layer, each generation burying the past beneath their feet. For decades, archaeologists knew that El Castillo, also called the Temple of Kukulkan, contained a second pyramid hidden within its outer walls. American researchers had discovered this inner structure back in 1936, almost 90 years after they first began exploring the site in 1924. But that second pyramid was just the beginning. In recent years, scientists deployed a technology called tridimensional electric resistivity tomography, mercifully shortened to ERT-3D. Using 96 electrodes placed around the structure, they sent electrical pulses deep into the stone. What came back changed everything. The scans revealed not just 2 pyramids, but 3. El Castillo is a pyramid within a pyramid within a pyramid. The smallest structure, standing 10 meters tall, was built sometime between 550 and 800 AD when Mayan civilization reached its peak. 2 more pyramids were constructed around it, approximately 300 and 600 years later, each one completely encasing what came before. The result is an ancient Russian nesting doll made of limestone and secrets. But reaching that innermost chamber might prove impossible. The infrastructure remains too unstable for excavation, and any attempt to dig could damage the entire site. So, the deepest secrets of El Castillo may have to remain buried forever. And now we have a building in Paris. Les Halles, Paris. This photograph from 1973 changed everything. Construction workers breaking ground for a new metro station in Paris made a discovery that defied all logic. 5 floors down, wrapped in metal scaffolding, stood the Fountain of the Innocents. Not a replica, not some forgotten basement, the actual fountain that once graced ground level centuries ago. But it wasn't alone. An entire underground district stretched beneath modern Paris. Buildings with perfect stone columns, ornate facades, and architectural details that would challenge today's finest craftsmen. All of it buried under what historians call a cultural layer, as if that explains how an entire neighborhood just vanished beneath the streets. Here's what makes no sense. These structures were 800 years old, built with nothing but hammers and chisels. Yet they survived centuries underground in perfect condition while our modern roads crack and crumble within years. The craftsmanship is flawless, the preservation mysterious, and the official explanation: the ground just naturally rose over time. In the age of the internet, these kinds of discoveries can't stay hidden anymore, and Paris isn't alone. Roman Theater of Benevento. In 1890, architect Almerico Maio-Martini was walking through the ancient Italian city of Benevento when something caught his eye. Beneath the foundations of old houses and the 18th century church of Santa Maria della Verità, he noticed traces of something far more ancient. Soon after, Maio-Martini began his initial excavations, carefully removing centuries of debris and forgotten history. The architect had rediscovered one of the most perfectly preserved Roman theaters in all of Italy, a massive structure that had been swallowed by history and forgotten for over 1,000 years. The theater had been constructed during Emperor Hadrian's reign, completed around 126 AD, but its story of disappearance was just as compelling as its construction. During the 6th century Lombard invasion, the theater was abandoned. Rather than being destroyed, it suffered a stranger fate. Floods and centuries of neglect gradually buried the entire structure under layers of sediment and debris. What the people of later centuries thought was solid ground was actually the roof of a colossal Roman entertainment complex. They built their homes directly on top of the ancient structure, completely unaware that beneath their feet lay a theater that once held 15,000 spectators. The systematic excavations that Maio-Martini started in 1890 revealed the theater's incredible preservation. The semicircular seating area, called the cavea, stretched 90 meters across. 3 levels of seating had been decorated with different architectural styles: Tuscan columns on the lowest level, Ionic in the middle, and Corinthian on top. The stage building still showed traces of colorful marble cladding and intricate decorations, but the work was far from easy. Excavations resumed in 1923, only to be interrupted by a devastating earthquake in 1930 and then World War II. Each setback meant more years of the theater remaining buried. Finally, after extensive restoration work, the theater reopened on June 26, 1957. The first performance was Aristophanes' The Women at the Parliament. After 16 centuries of silence, the ancient Roman theater was once again filled with the sounds of drama and applause. Today, visitors can walk through corridors that Roman citizens once used, sit where ancient audiences cheered, and witness how an entire civilization can vanish beneath our feet, waiting patiently to be rediscovered. The most disturbing question isn't what we've found, but what we haven't found yet. How many more secrets are waiting beneath our feet, ready to rewrite everything we thought we knew about our past? Let me know what you think in the comments below, and if you want to see more mysteries like this, make sure to subscribe for more.